During his show's 7-year run on ABC from 1985 to 1992, MacGyver, the everyman with a Swiss Army knife who was also a mechanical genius and international spy, faced off against a diverse series of adversaries. Scenery-chewing hitman Murdoch, he's getting his own video at some point, ruthless gangs of mercenaries and thieves, loggers, poachers, serial killers, cheating race car drivers, homicidal ex-girlfriends, homicidal current girlfriends, bad hockey dads, and as I covered in a previous video, guns. But there was another enemy MacGyver came up against back in the day, a resurgent evil that most people thought had been defeated decades before, the Nazis. In 1989, MacGyver did a Nazi episode, and not only was it a jarring break from the show's usual breezy and cheesy tone, it also proved surprisingly and upsettingly prescient. The episode is The 10% Solution, and it originally aired in November of 1989, early in MacGyver's 5th season. It begins with a woman on a jog through a park being chased and attacked by a gang of masked men. I'd just like to note for the record that these goons are able to catch and grab this full-grown woman in a fraction of the time it takes Flea and his gang of mercenaries to capture pint-sized Princess Leia in the first episode of the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. Am I saying MacGyver is better than the Obi-Wan Kenobi show? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Then we cut to an art auction where Pete Thornton and MacGyver, looking quite spiffy in a tuxedo, his mullet in full flower, have come to purchase some paintings for a program being run by the Phoenix Foundation for the purpose of buying art that's been hidden away in corporate collections and returning it to public display so that everyone can enjoy it. And right away, I'm reminded that the Phoenix Foundation, a benevolent and socially conscious private company that seems sincerely dedicated to fighting injustice and making the world a better place, is by far the most unrealistic aspect of this show. MacGyver building a working ultralight aircraft using bamboo garbage bags and some duct tape, I'll suspend my disbelief for that, no problem. A corporation that does good for its own sake? You've got to be kidding me. Anyway, Pete is bidding on this painting by Peter Paul Rubens. He blanches a little at the price. It ends up going for over $400,000, but he wins it. Just then, an old man named Sam rushes into the room and declares that they can't sell this painting because it belongs to him. It was stolen from his family. As guards are restraining him, he mentions something about the ERR, and MacGyver notices a serial number tattooed on his arm. Well, that's never good. Pete and MacGyver pay a visit to Dr. Sand, the Phoenix Foundation's art expert, who is optimistic that the painting, which was damaged in a struggle with Sam at the gallery, can be repaired. She also catches Pete up on what the ERR was, a Nazi agency empowered by Hitler to steal artwork and other cultural artifacts from Jewish families throughout Europe. It's possible Sam is telling the truth about the painting, and he says he can prove it. So Pete heads back to the art gallery to get the official provenance, while MacGyver goes to the police station to talk to Sam. Meanwhile, this guy, Hogarth, arrives at a silver mine to have a meeting with Mrs. Brandenburg about Sam, who they refer to as the old Jew. Brandenburg doesn't like the idea that Sam might be able to prove that the painting was stolen from his family by Nazis, because that would threaten whatever plans they have. So she tells Hogarth to have Sam killed. Then she stares ominously at a campaign poster for William Brand, a political candidate we glimpsed on TV in a previous scene. Also, Mrs. Brandenburg speaks in a thick and quite theatrical German accent, but I'm sure that's just a random character detail that won't turn out to be important. Moving on. We cut to the police station where we get the customary shot of a couple of sex workers being brought in, because how else are we going to know it's really a police station? MacGyver is talking to his pal Sergeant Gray and convinces him to let him talk to Sam. No sooner does Sam walk through the door than an inmate tries to stab him. Luckily, MacGyver jumps to the rescue, then Gray pulls his piece and blows the attacker away. William Brand is talking to Mrs. Brandenburg, who is his grandmother, and he's worried because Election Day is only 2 days away. Brandenburg tells him to relax. She's got everything under control. Then Hogarth comes back in and she reiterates her order to kill Sam and adds that Hogarth should also kill anyone who sees his proof that he owns the painting. Hogarth's like, I'll definitely do a successful killing this time. Of course, Sam is telling the truth about the painting, and he and MacGyver head to his place in MacGyver's awful truck that I hate. What was wrong with the Jeep? Why couldn't he just keep the Jeep? Anyway, Sam is showing MacGyver the proof of his ownership of the painting when Brandenburg's goons break in and abduct them. Hey, they look familiar. You know, if I didn't know any better, I'd say they were the same guys who attacked that jogger in the first scene. The goons take MacGyver and Sam to Brandenburg's silver mine. They're ushered into Brandenburg's office, where they find Dr. Sand, who was nabbed by Hogarth when she turned up to question him about inconsistencies and the official provenance of the painting. Hogarth gets a tip on the phone that Pete is about to discover their operation, so they decide to evacuate the silver mine. But before they go, Brandenburg takes a few minutes to explain her evil master plan. It turns out she's the widow of an SS officer, and she acquired quite a bit of valuable art through the Nazis' campaign of theft, including the Rubens painting that rightfully belongs to Sam. She sells items from her collection now and then to raise money to support her activities. The big idea, which, like all supervillain plans where the dam includes a big map to illustrate it, is to place Nazis in influential offices in 5 U.S. states, California, Nevada, Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, and then, when the time is right, secede from the rest of the U.S. so that those 5 states can form their own independent Aryan nation. One of those people in influential offices, or so Brandenburg hopes, is her grandson William Brand, whose campaign for Congress she has been funding. Brand's election campaign has been built around tough-on-crime rhetoric, given legitimacy by a series of recent attacks on joggers like the one we saw at the start of the episode, which we now know are being carried out by Brandenburg's own people. Brandenburg orders MacGyver, Sam, and Dr. Sand to be taken to the mine. On the way in, they run into Sergeant Gray, who is revealed to be one of Brandenburg's people. He reveals to MacGyver that he killed the would-be assassin at the police station in order to keep him quiet after he failed to kill Sam. Then he herds them into the mine and locks them in the bunker where they had been storing their stolen paintings. Then they use the gas canister from a welding rig to turn the bunker into a gas chamber. Gray wants to know why they just can't shoot them, and Hogarth smiles wickedly and explains, Madame is feeling nostalgic. So, at some point, there was a story meeting where someone said, how about we do a show where MacGyver has to escape from a Nazi gas chamber? And then they did that scene. It's a clever bit. MacGyver pulls the gas hose through the vent and pinches it off to keep the gas from killing them, then pokes a hole in the hollow door with his trusty knife and uses the hose to fill the door with gas, which he then ignites to blow the door open. Almost clever enough to overcome the horrendously bad taste inherent in doing a scene like that in the first place. They run out of the mine, and we get one of the highlights of the entire series for me when Hogarth sends one of his Nazi flunkies back to the mine, and MacGyver surprises him and damn near knocks his rotten Nazi head off. MacGyver punches Nazis. Ergo, punching Nazis is good. That's not one of the Beatitudes, but it should be. MacGyver hotwires a truck so they can escape, while Sam takes it upon himself to go after Hogarth and Brandenburg. He takes out Hogarth with a shovel and grabs his gun. Sergeant Gray catches MacGyver at the truck, leading to another highlight of the entire series when MacGyver punches out another Nazi and a Nazi cop to boot. Bonus points. Remember when punching a Nazi was like the least controversial thing someone could do? Of course MacGyver punches Nazis. He's the good guy. It would be weird if he didn't. Pete shows up with a bunch of cops, some of whom presumably are not Nazis, and catches William Brand hiding under some stairs. Looks like your popularity's taken a nosedive, Pete confidently declares. Yeah, because there's no way someone revealed to be a white supremacist could ever win a congressional election. MacGyver and Dr. Sand arrive just as it looks like Sam is about to shoot Mrs. Brandenburg, but instead he chooses to let her live. He tells her that the two of them are very different and marches her out the door to face justice. That just leaves Dr. Sand and MacGyver in the office. There's still the big map filled with dozens of little flags to indicate the Nazis that have been placed in high offices or positions of influence. MacGyver stares at the map, perhaps realizing the true scope of the threat and wondering what happens now. And that's it! Cue the theme music! Good night, folks! Be sure to tune in next time when MacGyver's rock star friend thinks her identical twin is trying to kill her. So, there are a few things that strike me about this episode. First, as I was just making fun of, this is some pretty heavy subject matter. I realized that by this point Nazis had become well established as pulp villains. Indiana Jones fought them in the movies, Captain America fought them in the comics. A lot of the horror of what the Nazis truly were had been watered down in order to make them more palatable for popular culture. But even so, this episode isn't just MacGyver foils a plot by some Nazis. It's MacGyver foils a plot by some Nazis in an episode that makes direct and repeated reference to the Holocaust and other actual atrocities. Adding to the unusual gravity of the episode is the performance of Nehemiah Persoff as Sam. Persoff inhabits the role with such authenticity that for many years after seeing the episode for the first time, I assumed he was an actual Holocaust survivor. He wasn't. He was just an actor giving a natural, emotionally vulnerable, and generally remarkable performance. A performance so good that every time I see it, I can't help but think it's too good for a guest shot on MacGyver. And did I mention they have to escape from a gas chamber? This is an episode of MacGyver! Less than a month earlier, he was crashing a Hitman Halloween party to rescue Murdoch's sister. A week after this episode is The Rock Star May or May Not Have an Evil Twin show. And after that is the Christmas episode guest starring Jeanette Nolan as a homeless lady who may or may not be the Virgin Mary. And then the week after that is the first episode where MacGyver dreams himself into a Western. And yes, I said the first episode. So the tonal shift from that sort of stuff to Holocaust episode is pretty drastic. Then again, MacGyver does have its share of very special episodes. I talked about one in a previous video, the story of how one of MacGyver's childhood friends was killed in an accidental shooting, fueling MacGyver's lifelong opposition to guns. And the week before the 10% Solution aired, the episode was Black Rhino, where MacGyver fights poachers of endangered species in Africa. It's not that the show never tackled serious topics, it frequently did. The thing is, it's still MacGyver, and I don't know, I feel like Nazis trying to take over the United States is punching a little above MacGyver's weight. MacGyver the show. I mean, not MacGyver himself. Clearly, MacGyver himself is the exact right person to call in that situation. Who else can you count on to stop the Nazi menace? Michael Knight? The A-Team? Hooperman? Forget about it. Between his responsibilities as a San Francisco police detective and the landlord of his apartment building, he doesn't have the time to topple an invisible empire. I'll tell you who else you can call. Superman. And I do mean Superman, not Dean Cain, because, you know. In its third season, in November 1995, almost exactly 6 years after the premiere of the 10% Solution, Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, aired the episode Superman, a show with a similar plot where a group of secret Nazis have infiltrated positions of power and influence in American culture and are working to gradually take over. The episode ends on more or less the same note as well, with the Nazis posing the immediate threat being defeated, but the characters left shaken at how far-reaching their influence may be. Truthfully, I'm shocked it took Superman as long as it did to defeat those Nazis. Couldn't Lois Lane have told him how MacGyver beat the Nazis 6 years ago? She must have heard all about it. She was one of his best friends. Terry Hatcher joke. Hey, another thing is, the 10% Solution turned out to be somewhat prophetic. And not just because it provided a plot for Lois and Clark to recycle. The master plan of Frau Brandenburg is presented in such a way that it seems over the top. Seriously, you're sacrificing credibility pretty much any time you pull back a curtain to reveal a huge custom-made map. That's just the way it is. But if you look beyond the cartoonish presentation, what she wants to do is pretty much what actual white supremacists did. Adopt a friendlier, more socially acceptable image, attract support by playing on people's fears and promising to restore America to some mythical, pristine state, and slowly accumulate power and influence over many years. Where do you think this guy came from? And why do you think he was able to find a home so quickly and so comfortably in one of our two major political parties? And look at the kind of people included in Brandenburg's group of secret infiltrators. Politicians and their wealthy benefactors, yes, but also judges, teachers, journalists, and police. Does this mean the writers of MacGyver were psychic or gifted with some uncanny, intuitive insight into the future course of society? No, although I will note that this Nazi thing is not the only example of the creators of MacGyver being a few decades ahead of their time. They also predicted that the secret to career success and financial security in the future would be to diversify your resume and work experience as much as possible, a principle which MacGyver, the military veteran, spy, scientist, environmental activist, survivalist, security expert, forest ranger, logger, teacher, hellfighter, race car driver, and Olympic-level hockey player, embodies more than just about anybody. I said just about. It's not that the creators of MacGyver possessed any special knowledge of the future. If they did, they would have known what a bad idea it was to replace MacGyver's Jeep with that fucking truck. God, I hate it! It's that they saw, like a lot of people saw back then, and have seen continuously throughout the last few decades, that if white nationalists were going to try to take power, which they obviously were, it's inherent in the ideology, they weren't going to start an armed revolution and try to topple our existing institutions. They were going to worm their way into those institutions in order to eventually control them. And that's just what they've been doing, and it's what they're still doing. Maybe if more of us had been watching MacGyver and paying attention, or just paying attention, period, these past 30 years, and specifically the last, 6, would have gone down a little differently. Imagine what the world would be like if we all heeded his warnings and followed his example. Sure, we'd have worse hair, but we'd have a better world. A world with fewer Nazis, or at least fewer Nazis in charge of shit. I'd grow a mullet for that. Some things are worth sacrificing your... No, absolutely not. I want the Jeep. I will not be caught dead driving that thing. I don't care how much better the world would get. There are some lines I will not cross.